Now, in the spiritual exercises, St. Ignatius gives us some very practical and very valuable advice for making discernments. One very important concept to him is indifference. What does he mean by indifference? It's kind of similar to the Buddhist idea of detachment. To be indifferent to something doesn't mean that you don't love something. It doesn't mean that you don't have feelings about it. It doesn't even mean that you don't have ulterior motives. It goes without saying, in fact, that we do. It means that we're not, or that we choose not to be attached to the outcome. In the Buddhist sense, it means that we can love something fully and then let it go. We don't cling to it. In the Ignatian sense, indifference means not being attached to one thing or another, but willing to take either as God leads, and with a whole heart and with a contented spirit. It usually comes up around making a decision. Do I do this or I do this? And letting go of our attachment to which option it is, which way to go. It means getting some interior distance from your own likes and dislikes, your own desires and preferences, and choosing to be content with either one. As Martin points out in his book, this leads us to a place of freedom. So, as we look at all the things in our lives, and as we consider which of them is congruent with the vision that we've received or the call that we've received, Ignatius invites us to step back from them almost as if it were someone else considering them, and to get some objective distance, and even more importantly, affective distance, emotional distance from them. This is going to help us make a good decision, a good discernment. The word that Ignatius uses is election. It sounds strange. We don't use the word election that way. And yet, when we elect someone, we make a choice about someone, right? An election is a choice. When we elect a candidate, we're choosing the best man for the job or the best woman for a job. Likewise, when we make an election in the Ignatian sense, we're making the best choice. Ignatius describes what he calls 3 times of making an election. In English, there are 3 ways that decisions can be made. In the first way, what Ignatius calls the first time, and feel free to look at your cheat sheet that I've provided as we discuss this. In the first way, there's no need for any great deliberations or hand-wringing. It's really clear what God wants and what we should do, and hopefully we just do it. In his book, Martin compares this method to the story that we read about St. Paul on the road to Damascus. It's an awakening experience, yeah. But Paul also had absolutely no doubt about what God wanted of him. He changed direction, and pretty fast, too. The second way of making a discernment, what Ignatius calls the second time of making an election, is through the use of the discernment of spirits. Specifically, where they're thinking about a decision or praying about it or fantasizing about it, elicits in oneself a spirit of consolation or desolation. This is a very valuable means of discernment, what we call affective, because emotional discernment. We'll be looking more closely at this later on in this course. The third way of making a good discernment, what Ignatius calls the third time of making an election, a person isn't buffeted by different spirits, meaning you might not have a lot of feelings coming up around this issue, but you still want to make a good choice. Ignatius says, when this is the case, there's a couple of ways you can go about it. For the first method, first, Decide on the matter that you will be discerning. Second, put yourself in a place of indifference about the outcome. Third, ask God for help. Fourth, analyze the situation logically, weighing carefully the pros and the cons. Fifth, trust your reason to make the good decision, to make the best decision. And sixth, in prayer, offer this decision of yours to God, and then pay attention to the feelings that are coming up. And look for some affective confirmation that you've made a good decision. The first method is simple, and in fact it bears a lot of resemblances to Zarathustra's method that we talked about earlier. Let's go on to the second method, though. In the second method, first, we remind ourselves that God comes first. Second, we imagine what advice we would give to someone who came to us with this question. Third, we imagine that we are on our deathbeds looking back at this decision. What, from that perspective, was the best decision to be made? Fourth, imagine that you are standing before God's throne at judgment. And now you're looking back at this decision. What is best from that perspective? Fifth, when you've made this discernment, offer it to God. Offer your decision to God and pay attention, once again, for some affective confirmation that you've made a good choice.